Hello everyone, today we will lead a discussion about organizational environment and globalization. That's our outline. Firstly, Catherine will talk about the globalization's definition, and secondly, Edward and Annabelle will talk around the globalization's impact on Dixon. Thirdly, Naomi and I will move on to the next topic about General Motors. Finally, a comparison and a conclusion will be made.
Okay, so we found many definitions of globalisation, but this one here in particular we thought was really good and accurate. The process has had many benefits for the business world over the decades. It's increased global trade and opened up competition. It's allowed the smaller firms to now be able to compete with the larger ones, and it's brought a lot of wealth and employment opportunities to many regions of the world. So as a result, this has had large implications for the management styles of managers across the globe. They've had to consider options such as outsourcing. Here you've got a quote from the Cortex book, which summarises the fact that it's inevitable these days, so you've got to acknowledge it. So moving on to the causes of globalisation, there are numerous factors, but I think the most important one here is the technological innovations. Not only internet, mobile and telecommunications, but also fibre optic cables and satellite technology. This has also been helped by transportation improvements, deregulation of economic and trading systems, government standardisation such as traffic control rules, relaxation of foreign exchange controls and reduction of trade barriers in particular are very important. Something we're going to talk about quite a lot today is reduction to developing countries such as China and India. Okay, so we also wanted to put a bit of academic theory in here. So we found 4 strategies for entering international markets. So first of all, exporting is basically when you market and sell a product in a different country. Global outsourcing is basically when, instead of producing something themselves, it's made abroad. A joint venture is merging with another firm for various reasons, which is stated here in this quote, which can improve efficiency. And a greenfield venture is, again, something we'll discuss further later, which is building a subsidiary in another country.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about Dixon. Pretty much, if you haven't read the case study, Dixon is a pencil making company. Started in 1795 with one guy creating and designing his own lead-based pencils, and which led to, in 1996, for the first time turning over revenues of $100 million. We'll talk a little bit about how globalization has actually affected Dixon. Midway through the 20th century, the Chinese entered the market, which decreased Dixon's market share in the US. Obviously, this is a big problem for Dixon. This was caused by the Chinese government subsidizing these Chinese pencil-making companies, allowing them to sell under production costs. Adding this to the cheap materials and low labour costs, they had a massive advantage over Dixon, which they couldn't compete with. To counteract this, Dixon tried to use politics. How did they battle this threat? The coalition of US pencil-making companies lobbied for anti-dumping duties in the US, and in 1994 they were awarded these. However, the Chinese were still making cheaper and better pencils, undercutting Dixon by 1 pence per pencil. So this battle didn't work for them.
I'm now going to talk about Dixon shifting its production abroad to be more competitive. So Mr. Para, Dixon's CEO, said that he could actually bring in products cheaper than he could actually produce in the US. So he has outsourced or delocalized most of its production. So the erasers are made in South Korea. He created a greenfield venture in China to produce wooden slats, and he has created a production plant in Mexico that manufactures the pencils himself. However, he kept the production of lead in the US to keep a good control on the quality. Socially, Dixon has created job losses in the US by outsourcing and delocalizing. But however, it has created lots of jobs in South Korea, Mexico and China. In 2005, less than 6% of Dixon's employees actually worked in the US, so it shows that lots of jobs or actually elsewhere in the world. Dixon also cares about the environment. In 1997, it came up with an eco-friendly soya crayon. It was a huge success, and so they sold about $12 million of it. But the outsourcing and delocalization has also increased pollution because of all the transportation between South Korea, China, Mexico, and the States, of course. Try and stay ahead of the competition, Dixon has tried to innovate. They came up with a new product. It's a pencil that's got a triangular shape to fit adult hands better. They've also came up with a new technology preventing lead slippage. This is an innovation in the manufacturing chain to improve the outcome. In 2005, Dixon was bought out by an Italian company called Fila. This shows that Dixon is now fully engaged in globalization. Even though they were bought out by another company, they still have kept the same management that they have had since it started.
General Motors, GM, is an American motor company established in 1908. And over the decades, it has experienced many challenges and success due to the globalization. It is noticeable that it has moved its production to China and Mexico, and a new company has been created, which has required most of the assets of the old one after it went bankrupt in 2009.
Troy and I are going to discuss 8 ways in which GM was affected by globalisation and how they responded to each of these changes. So firstly, GM has changed its management methods. So this can be seen in the GM Sutton plant, where strong attention was given to give workers a voice, and pay was linked to quality and productivity. Also secondly, globalisation has meant there's been an increase in foreign competition. This can be seen with the figure. So in the past they've responded by outcompeting competition. This can be seen with Volkswagen, where GM cut prices by 11%, and Volkswagen tried to match this and did the same, but GM sales doubled, whereas Volkswagen's fell by 4.2%. It's also led to an interdependent economic system, which actually meant that the final process was worsened around the world. This led to GM becoming bankrupt in 2009, which led to a reconstruction of the firm to create GM Company with a $5 billion aid from the government. Since GM has cut EU production by a fifth and plant closures have happened and 8,000 job losses. GM can also shift production to the US. This can create new assembly lines in Brazil, India and Mexico. This means they can take advantage of lower production costs and to increase their worldwide market share. It can also give GM the ability to develop alliances and joint ventures. This means that they can obtain economies of scale. This has meant that GM has owned Germany's Opel and once owned Sweden's Saab and Jeppesen Isuzu. It's also established a joint venture with Toyota to create a high quality small car. It's also changed GM's production methods. This means that they've turned whole sub-assemblies over to suppliers, which has actually decreased installation time by 18 minutes with a third of the workers. It's also moved IT methods from being external to being 90% internal, which because they have comparative advantages.
Trade blocks such as NAFTA have been created, meaning GM can take advantage of Mexican workers' low wages at $50 less than the average US worker at the same efficiency level. GM has also been able to build a $600 billion blue Macau plant to create a 3,000 cheaper car to cater for local audiences. Globalization has led to a global oil shock, meaning GM has to diversify away from SUV. GM therefore has introduced an electric hybrid, which is competitive against Toyota, and which is an industry leader in flex fuel vehicle which can run on either gasoline.
Okay, so just before we conclude, we've come up with a few similarities and differences when we compare the two companies. So obviously both companies have felt the effects of globalisation and the threat of competition from countries which can produce at a lower rate, particularly Mexico, China and India. They both created innovative products in response to the environmental changes, such as the electric hybrid for GM and the eco-friendly soya crayons for Dixon. They both experienced job losses, they both merged with other companies, and they've both taken advantage of the North American Free Trade Agreement, which Troy talked about, which is located to Mexico. However, there are a few differences. Dixon didn't change their management style when they did business in Italy.